Welcome to the Bitcoin RX podcast. This is your host, Nurse Ralph. Today, I got with me Joe Bryan, who's going to help me give you a weekly dose of orange pills so you don't die from fiat disease. Joe, my man, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Ralph. How are you?
Yeah, I am good, man. Thank you for being here. I wanted to start by saying, so the first time I watched your video, I gotta say, I I didn't really appreciate it as much, to be honest, because I felt like I already knew what was going on ish. I
Oh yeah,
kind of
you
knew the
will.
problem
Yeah.
in a way, but like, and after this, I kind of put myself in like my shoes, like 5 years ago when I did not know anything about Bitcoin or anything about money. And then I watched it again and I was like, wow, like this is actually an amazing video. Like the second time I watched it, I was actually listening to everything you had to say, and I was like, damn, it's a shame that this video doesn't have a billion views already. Like this is something that a lot of people need to see. Like this is crazy.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Ralph. There's nothing in that video that a Bitcoiner who's been in the space for a sufficient amount of time doesn't know.
Yeah,
It is, it's in the same way that it was my motivation to create the video was just getting what's in my head and what's in your head and what everyone's head
yeah,
down into a story
yeah,
where you can then help somebody who is coming in for the very first time connect all the dots in a very easy way. Whereas we've had to do that by sort of inferring and listening to, and then rearranging the jigsaw in our own minds.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I would say Bitcoin is not going to see anything new in there. It's just the way it's delivered and the accessibility.
yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
Thank you for watching it a second time.
Oh yeah, of course. No, I love the way you put it together. That was great. But before we dive into that one, though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey before Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, I studied physics at university, and then I spent 10 years in the city, always in the UK, as an equity derivatives trader, and then left and spent 10 years then building businesses, but founding, scaling, selling, and then scaling other businesses. And then in 2024, I left the fiat world to focus entirely on Bitcoin. Um, I found Bitcoin in 2020, which is comparatively late versus many people, but still very early in the span of time to come. But it's, over those few years, it became very clear there's just nothing else more important to be working on than Bitcoin. And so I was able to take a step out of that business. And now all my time is spent thinking about the outside of family, the most important thing in the world.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. And what was it that drew you into Bitcoin? Did you have a need to know, or was it just like straight out of like just curiosity?
Well, it was COVID.
Okay.
It was um, early COVID, so early 2020, when the world was shutting down, and having concerns about all the money being printed, and then looking at gold and looking at macro trades, and then coming across Bitcoin again, because we all have these touch points with Bitcoin, but it was the right time for me, and then you end up just going down the rabbit hole, and conviction builds over time.
Yep. That's true.
Um,
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I view it now, you know, from a perspective which is a million miles away from that very first perspective I came in with, because you come in from your own framework of how you see the world and see one aspect of Bitcoin which is attractive to you, or you see some value in. You just don't see the rest of Bitcoin. You don't see
Yeah.
all the other things it fixes until you start to do some work.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's funny because like I feel like now that I said I've been talking to a lot of different people, and I feel like COVID really that's when a lot of people found Bitcoin for some reason. Like, and it's kind of odd. It's like everybody that I've been talking to, it's like they always, well, not everybody, but like it's like a lot of people are like, yeah, yeah, I got it during COVID. I got it during COVID. I'm wondering, like, is there something about being locked inside a house that just makes you think about the problem? Like,
Well, there's definitely an element of that, but I think it just jolted everybody out of their normal routines
right,
and made
right,
you think about other things perhaps for the first time, and certainly thinking about, you know, the impact on society, and that how something external to you can have a drastic impact on your life.
yeah,
We don't have, thankfully, wars or things like that in the US or the UK in living memory. And so it's very rare that you have something which just has this seismic impact to everybody. And being at home, not having to travel to work, some people not being able to work, just gives everyone more time to think. And then when you see the actions of governments, they just switch on the money printer, and then all the assets start going up, even though the world has stopped. It becomes a very clear signal to people like something isn't quite right here. And then they have the time to actually think about exploring that question. So yes, it doesn't surprise me that you hear this from a bunch of people.
Okay. Wow, wow. Now, talking about your video actually, what was the inspiration behind like the storyline specifically, like the deserted island, the terms fiatellos, like what was it that like what inspired the whole thing actually?
Well, I needed to create something
Yeah.
where in 30 minutes I could get somebody who knew absolutely nothing about Bitcoin, perhaps had never even heard of it, to wanting to learn about Bitcoin in 30 minutes. And great way to help people engage with stuff is just a story. And when going back to that first point is that Bitcoiners, we have this cause and effect sort of map in our mind where everything goes back to the money printer, or the ability for somebody to corrupt the money in some way, whether it be the money printer, whether it be the censorship resistant nature or some other aspect. But for people who haven't done that work, all they see are the consequences. They see the corruption of society downstream in all these different ways. And so looking at that, if you didn't have Bitcoin and you didn't have a framework of understanding all the aspects of Bitcoin or hard money in general, you'd really struggle to get back to pinning down what the cause was, or knowing that there was a single cause. You just think all these things exist and they're all independent, but they're not. They're all rooted in a single thing. And so, trying to, instead of starting with the consequences and trying to explain where they came from, which is really hard. You start from a really clean place in just an island in a story, and then you make, just with a couple of changes, you just play it out, and then it ends up looking like today. And then all of a sudden, you don't have to have explained where today came from because you've seen where it came from. It came from the corruption of the money, and then it's obvious. And so when you see it, you can't unsee it again. But trying to explain it the other way around would be super difficult. And the fact that it's a story, it means that you see it once and you remember it. It's like someone tells you a story, you remember the story. You don't remember all the details, but you remember the story, right? And this is the same thing. The idea is you remember the story stays with you. And then as your brain then changes because you've got this mental framework in which to place the things that you then observe in the world. And then you start to see things differently. You say, okay, that's because of the money. That's because of the money. That's because of the money. And then you've got this skeletal mental framework, and every time you're seeing something, he's like putting a bit more meat on the skeleton. And then you read a book, you listen to a podcast, and then very quickly you go from having no conception to having a fully working model in your own mind of how the world works and why Bitcoin is the solution. And so yeah, I think the video, I'm just delighted the way that sort of helped people achieve it. But I think the other aspect of the video is the two paths of the island, because it's one thing to say things fall apart when you corrupt the money, but it's another thing to show that things actually improve when you don't corrupt the money. So it's not just neutral versus negative, it's negative versus good.
Yep. Wow. That is wow. Okay. Damn. Yeah.
And then within the video, it's not just explaining Bitcoin, but it's helping people understand how free markets are supposed to work when you haven't corrupted them, and the benefits that accrue to the population. when you do that, and the quality of life lifting for everybody, and prices going down and quality going up, as opposed to prices going up and quality going down, which is what we see in the world. And it's just you realize, like, this makes no sense at all. This actually makes no sense at all. When 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 the way the world actually behaves when you leave people alone is the polar opposite.
Yeah. No, I love that actually. You know that when you said it, I think your specific quote was, in a free market with perfect money, prices go down forever and products quality
Oh,
goes up forever. That was a great quote. I was like, wow, that's it got you thinking. It's like, wow, that's
but
true.
but
Like,
but again, in this, Ralph, like, I can't take credit for any of this stuff. This is me pulling together a story, bringing facets of all the great work so many Bitcoiners before have done. Right, so that one slide in the video about the free market and competition and innovation and prices going down, quality going up, that's that's Jeff Booth's work. That's Jeff Booth's Price of Tomorrow. Wonderful book distilled into 2 minutes in a really rough way, right? But it gets to the core concept, and it's like you get the skeletal version, and once you get the skeletal version, you sort of know what's going on, and then you read Jeff's book and you fill in all the detail around it. So I can't take credit for any of the insights in there. It's just the way it's pulled together from everybody else.
yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. No, no, hey man, it was still well put. The story was great. I mean, yeah, I bet I understand. That's fair. Um, there is a lot something else that you said that caught my attention. I didn't really understand why necessarily. It was when you said that governments, no matter what, will always have a budget deficit. I don't think my nursing brain quite understand why that is. Can you explain
It
that to me?
So I said, I think it's however well run they are, inevitably over time, there will be a point where they have a deficit. Because if you're managing any budget and you're subject to external events of any kind, if you run that budget forever, there's gonna be a year or a point in there where something has happened and you're spending more than you're receiving. And even you could be the greatest budget manager of all time, but you can't control what happens in the world. Right. That was more the point. It doesn't have to be that the government is structurally terrible. Right. Judge the quality of that statement on its, right, through whatever lens you see it. Um, it can be through natural disaster or some external event which causes you to be bringing in less in taxes than you are spending, and therefore where in a scenario when you cannot just print the money for free, you have to make some changes in the same way that, Ralph, when you're running your family budget, you have to be conscious of the amount that you're bringing in and the amount you're spending. You can't just spend more than you bring in. Like, you've got to balance it because you don't have a big red button that allows you to print money on demand, right? So every other entity in the entire world is subject to this constraint, apart from the government. Government brackets central bank. They are the only ones that have this privilege.
And and of course, it's illegal for us to do it. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, you can do it, but we can't. So it's kind of, yeah, that's a little unfair here.
But it's theft.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
it's theft of your time and energy
Right, right.
because they
Like the
can
first, yeah, go ahead.
because they can print for free what you have to work for.
Right, right.
If you work for something and then they print some of it for free, they've devalued what you worked for.
And that remind me of like the Jack Muller's one of his podcasts. He said no man should work for what another man can print. And the first time I heard that, I was like, I mean, I don't know. I was like, nah, that I didn't really. I mean, I got it, but I was like, I mean, I guess it's okay if I'm getting paid and I'm getting a raise. Like that was kind of in the back of my brain. And the more I think about it, I'm like, he's right. Like,
Yeah,
why am I mean, if I'm working for something that somebody else is printing, I'm better find a way to store that energy into something that they cannot print, like to preserve all the effort that I put into this world. So it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, because think about the logical consequences of that. If somebody can print something for free, but you have to work for, what happens when they work out there's something that can't be printed and something they should own? What's their logical action? Their logical action is to print more of the stuff you're working for to buy the stuff they can't print for free. And so it will just steal everything. So the logical thing to do is for central banks around the world and governments to start printing their own currency to buy Bitcoin, which I think is where this ends. Because once enough people have made the leap and have made the switch, the fiat system will start dying faster. And when you start dying faster, you start printing more money and start thinking about how you try and bail yourselves out. And that's you've just got to own as much Bitcoin as you can as quickly as you can, which means you just print more money, which means you steal everything. It's the one time in history where the whole world can front run the governments and the central banks, and no one can stop them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It almost feels like it's going to be like Venezuela or Zimbabwe or Argentina in America at some point in the future. I mean, I don't know how bad it's gonna get, but I try not to think about it too much. But at the same time, you kind of wonder ooh, when this
Well,
happens, it's gonna
you're
be
right.
painful. Yeah.
It is going to be painful. You are lucky to be in America. Every other country in the world is in a worse position
Yeah. Yeah.
because the dollar will be the last one to die
Right.
because
And
the dollar is essentially the financial system,
yep.
and the everyone's short the dollar through borrowing all around the world and through financing individuals, companies, countries, structurally short the dollar, and the dollar is the strongest, and it's enforced by the US military, and so yeah, the dollar will be the last one standing,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
then that too is going to succumb to Bitcoin.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's the cleanest, dirtiest shirt in the laundry pile.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
basically yeah.
exactly right, exactly right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I saw that you also work in investment banking for a while as well, right?
Yeah, I was
Oh yeah.
a derivative trader for 10 years. So within investment banks, you have the trading side,
Yeah.
which is interacting in the markets, and then the investment banking side, which is more around advisory and capital raising and such for typically for companies.
Oh,
But I
nice,
was
nice.
I was on the trade I was on the trading side.
Okay. Yep. 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 And I realized that you did not really talk about uh banks or anything like that in your video. I was like, oh, I'm surprised. Oh, like
All
not
right.
like mostly like what happens to your money in the bank mostly.
Yeah. Well, in 30 minutes, Ralph, there's a bunch of things I had to compromise on level of detail on. So, I didn't touch on the structure of the banking system there. And it was in an earlier version, but I couldn't get some things had to fall away. And I thought if the people watching it end up being motivated to learn about Bitcoin, they'll get you'll get that extra level of surprise when they start digging into how the banking system works, because that's a Pandora's box of just horrifying complexity and it just compounds the problem. And so I've in the video I've abstracted the entire financial system into a single big red button. Right? Which clearly is not how it works. But if the government wants to print money, they press a button and they print money. But in reality, it's not quite the government. It's the combination of the government and the central bank, which is independent, but not really independent. And then you have the commercial banks, which exist within the fiat system, that have a license from the central bank to effectively bring more money into existence through loans, etc., and expand credit to the population. Are they bringing money into existence? But this is an exorbitant privilege for a small set of individual companies, but that allows them to then take excessive risk because they know they will get bailed out by the central bank. Because the central bank can print money for free. If they can't print money for free, then the bailouts aren't there. And if the bailouts aren't there, what does that mean about the banks? The ones that take excessive risk, they go bust.
They're gonna fail. Yeah.
You leave a stronger banking system behind. So it has the impact of reducing the level of risk that banks take because it's a free market process. And this is the point we don't live in the free market at all. It's the free market when we're on the receiving end, right? But it's not the free market for the banking system. So they will. We don't operate necessarily on fractional reserve banking in every country, but when you put your dollars in the bank is able to lend out a certain amount of money, but way in excess of your dollars. And in the US, I think I may be wrong. I believe the reserve requirement is zero. So if you're a bank that has a license to be able to bring credit into existence, and you can lend money to people, keep zero reserves against that,
That's
which is
wild.
so you create money out of thin air, you lend it to someone, they have to pay you interest on that. If they don't, then if it's a secured loan, you get to take whatever they bought with it. If it's an unsecured loan, then you've got to go after them. But the bank's never had the money in the first place. So
Jesus.
if it goes well, they get to keep the profits, which is the interest. If it goes badly, and you don't pay back the loans, and sufficient amounts of other people don't pay back the loans, and they have no reserves, then as soon as you are net losing, you're bust. You're insolvent. And if you're a deposit taking bank at the same time in a bankruptcy scenario, the depositors' deposits into the bank are loans to the bank. They're not separate in a bankruptcy scenario. And so whenever you have a banking system that is operating on very small reserves against their lending book, which we are every time there's a banking crisis, the numbers come down
You
because
get
otherwise
yep.
it's insolvent.
Yeah.
And you have to have a fiat. You're in a fiat system that requires ever more growth ever more lending to drive the growth. Then, whenever the asset prices turn and start to drop, or there's a tightening of liquidity in the system somewhere, and people start to um, fail on their repayments, fail on their go rescind on their loans, then the banks become very very shaky because there's such a small cushion.
Right.
So
Right.
they call the central bank, they call the government, say, look, if asset prices continue to fall, we're going bust and we're taking all the depositors with us. And because the government's run by politicians, they're, well, that can't happen on my watch. I'm not going to get re-elected. So what do I do? Is I'll bail you out. I'll bail you out, which is effectively most bailouts are either printing money explicitly in the short term to inject liquidity into the banking system, but largely to sweep assets that are toxic off the balance sheets of banks into a second store, which then refreshes the balance sheets of the banks. So if the banks lent lots of money, for example, on speculative mortgages, and someone buying the fifth home in Florida or something like that, with
Right.
no income, it's clearly going to go bad, and that's going to take a long period of time. Once things start to begin to fail, a long period of time to play out, which is going to hamper the bank's ability to do further lending. And the government central bank, they want banks to lend because that's what drives the growth. And if they don't lend, we don't get growth. We don't get growth. The system begins to fail because it's a debt-based system. And so they're incentivized to shift those portfolios of difficult and loss-making assets, like the fifth home in Florida, into a separate pot, which gives the bank a fresh balance sheet again to then go and start lending. And guess what happened? They got bailed out last time. So inevitably, 10 years later, they've got this toxic portfolio again. They're super leveraged. And the same thing happens. But this separate pool of assets over time just loses money because it was structurally negative in the first place. Like your chance of getting paid back on that fifth Florida home is very low.
Yep.
The pool of capital here gets slowly eroded, but the loss gets covered by printing at the central bank level, which just expands the money supply. So you go, the banking system is fine. Don't look at all the money we just printed over there against the bad loans. But whenever they print money, they're diluting the value of every dollar. So that's not costless. That's taking money out of your pocket and your neighbor's pocket by making your dollar worthless. And this all exists, all of it exists because someone has a big red button that allows them to change the qualities of the money. If you take away the big red button, there is no ability for them to do the bailouts unless they can make it work with their budget. And if they can't, then the bank goes. And so you have to reform the banking system. You have to go it naturally enforces a higher quality decision making within the banks. Yeah, it forces you away from a debt-based system because if you take too much risk, you'll bust. So the people who are left are taking less risk. And the depositors are also aware, like, if I bank with somebody who's taking too much risk and they go bust, I lose my money.
Yep. Yeah. Oh
And so
yeah.
you don't do it.
You don't.
You
Yeah.
don't do
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah.
But what you'll probably notice across countries is that now we have, deposit insurance
Yeah.
creeping in.
FDIC. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's socialization of losses before they happen. So that's basically saying we recognize that when you have money, dollars, and you put them in the banks, they're not really yours. And when the banks go bust, we will cover you. But what message do you think that sends to the banks?
Yeah.
It's
Damn. Yep.
it's actually you can take more risk now, guys, because we've insured
Right.
your depositors.
Right. 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 Sheesh.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely bonkers. So the entire system is corrosive and structurally is going to die. It's just a question of at what point do they devalue the dollar so much that it crumbles? They have to just print more money to grow the economy, and they print more money to bail out the effect of the negative quality investments or the negative expected return investments over time. And the size of the problem just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. This is why in '08, I forget the numbers, but people were talking about like 300 billion or 400 billion or 500 billion. Now
Yeah.
it's trillions.
Yeah.
300 billion today would be like,
Oh, that's a
"What?"
joke. That's
I'm not even gonna read the article,
that's
300
pocket
billion.
money.
Yeah. It's a
Wow.
bit like that. It's a bit like
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
And in
That's
in
wild.
the 80s or 90s, 300 billion would be an absolutely obscene number. I mean,
Yeah.
it is an obscene number, but relatively speaking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me, that just reminds me of this quote that somebody said that um I forgot who said it, but it's like the money in the bank is not your money, it's not in the bank, and also it's not real money. Like I was just like, the first time I heard that I was like, what you mean? Like this makes no sense. But now I'm like, huh, that's actually true. Like this, it's really just it's not your money, it's not in the bank, it's not real money. It's just plain blank period. Just yeah.
Exactly, and you can test it for yourself. Just walk into the bank and try and withdraw your money in cash, and they'll say
Oh
no.
yeah. Yeah. Oh
Or
yeah.
try and send it to somebody, they'll say no.
Right, right, right. Oh
And
yeah,
so if you require permission, you are not wealthy.
right, right,
You cannot be wealthy if you require permission
right.
because you don't own it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There's a
so
time. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go on, Rob.
No, because I was gonna say there's a time when I remember I was about to pay my I was about to pay down my car, and I remember walking into the bank asking for, I think it was maybe 5 grand, just to to transfer it to another bank so I can finish my car payment. And it's like the person was like, "Why do you need the money?" Like, "Oh, to pay my car." It's like, uh, like I just felt like I just got asked. I had to ask for permission to
Yeah.
use something that I worked hard for, that I put in there. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, am I not supposed to take the money out? Like, is am I doing something wrong here? Like I felt like I was getting questioned like I
Yeah.
was a criminal. And then I was like,
Well,
oh,
you end
I
up
felt
getting
wrong.
treated like like you've done something wrong when you haven't. And if you go back to the story, Ralph, there's 2 things they changed about the money. One is that they started printing more of it, and the second, they changed the censorship-resistant nature of it, and they made everyone put it in the banks, so they couldn't hold it themselves anymore. But it's for the people's protection to, fight money laundering or terrorism or
Right.
fraud or whatever.
Yeah.
But we'll keep you safe. We'll
Of
keep you
course.
safe.
Of course.
The
Yeah.
the 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 reason he did this in the video is because the money was leaking out the system. The value was leaking out the system because people were trying to get rid of their fiatellos to buy satoshis. It's exactly the same now. People are trying to sell their dollars for Bitcoin, and so you start putting more and more restrictions in the flow of the funds. It's one thing to say you're not allowed to do something. It's another thing to say you're allowed to do this thing if you jump over all these hurdles, right? And you have a huge amount of patience. And you can imagine, like any sort of customer funnel in a business, like a marketing funnel. Like if you're trying to sell a product or you're trying to get a customer to complete a process, you want to try and make that as frictionless as possible. They're trying to do the opposite. They're trying to make it as frictionful as possible so that the drop off in people who actually have the patience and the motivation and um, yeah, I was going to say the time because we're time poor as well, right? Because they make you wait on the phone forever, and they can put delays and things on. They do whatever the banking system in the background, under the guise of keeping you safe, is really just trying to shut the exits to stop people selling the dollar. And it could be the dollar, it could be the pound, it could be whatever, because the value's leaking out the system. And the faster the value leaks out the system, the faster they need to print the dollars. So the end is already known. It's just a question of how long it takes to get there and what specific path we take along the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And I wanted to ask you about how you mentioned before how once you see the problem, you cannot unsee it. And and of course it's because of the quality of our money. And because of the quality of the money, we ended up with all these different problems that you mentioned in your video, like you got mental health crisis, addiction crisis, chronic health issues, homelessness, wealth inequalities, obesity problems. Like like we feel those problems, like we kind of see all these problems around us, but what makes it so difficult to relate those problems to the quality of the money? Like, why is it so difficult to see?
Because it's complicated and it's cause and effect, but it's sort of it's changing state along the way because it's monetary inflation manifesting itself in something else. And so, for example, if you when you print money, it causes general level of prices to go up. But when that happens, there's 3 main things for inflation. One is it distorts the price signals. The second is that it increases business input costs, and the third is asset inflation. But if we just focus on the business input costs, when every business in the economy, their input costs start going up because money's being printed, they have to defend their profit margin, not to be greedy, but just to keep it what it was. Right? Because if the things you use to build your product go up in price, then you're making less. Right? And if you're building a business and your profit margins start going down, there's a point where you think this isn't worth it anymore, and you close your business. And so, in order to justify it, you have to find some way to increase the profit margin again. The first is to, well, just pass on the price increase to the customer. So if you're building a product, it would be the product is the same size, the same quality, but it just now costs a bit more because it costs a bit more to produce. That's like very visible inflation. The price goes up in the shops, right? The second one is to say, well, I'll keep the quality the same and I'll keep the price the same, but I'll just shrink it a little bit. And that's shrinkflation. That's also what we see in the shops. Price doesn't change, but now it feels smaller,
Yep. Yep.
right? And they don't tell you, and you're like, I'm sure this was bigger last week.
Yeah.
And that's semi-visible inflation because you could sometimes you notice it, sometimes you don't, but it's not as explicit as a price increase. And then the third one is to not change the price or the size, but to compromise on the quality. So you make the product worse. You make it more cheaply. So you try and find some way to compromise on the input cost again to lower them. And so if you're manufacturing a product, for example, that would be you switch from using higher quality components to lower quality components. But what happens when you do that? It just breaks faster. So you buy it and then you have to rebuy it again sooner than you would have done because it was of lower quality. That's still inflation. It's the inflation through the frequency with which you have to buy something. So over the past of time, you've spent more. That's inflation, but it's hidden. It's hidden on day one. And then the other sort of more insidious, or like subtle version of that is where the the quality impacts something else. So if you're building a product, that product might break at some point, like a car or a computer or whatever. You're using it, it's utility, it breaks, you replace it, and you have to just replace it sooner. But if you're consuming something like a service or food, for example, you only get to do it once. You're not consuming the same food again in 3 months without buying it. And so if the price hasn't gone up and it looks the same, they've compromised on something else, and that's the quality of the ingredients. And so you start ingesting food which is of lower quality. The ingredients are of lower quality. And we end up industrializing the food process and replacing quality ingredients with increased levels of industrialized sludge. And maybe on day one you don't notice. Maybe it even tastes better on day one,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
But then your health starts to deteriorate. Like we see a rise in obesity and knock-on health issues. This is just inflation. That's inflation. But trying to get somebody to link back obesity to the money printer. I mean, try doing that the other way around. You have no chance. You've got absolutely no chance. But when you lay it out, going from the money printer to obesity, it's like, well, of
Mhm.
course,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course that's the
Wow.
case,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And so
That is
it's one example, and you've got lots of these little follow-on examples of what happens in this scenario, and this scenario, and this scenario, and all the things that you listed before. They all just fall out, and they're all the direct result of the money printer. And so it's very hard for people, very, very hard for people. And I like that the video is like a map. It's just you see it once, and then you're not going to unsee it again. It's just easy. And to your point, if we had everyone in the world watch the video, we'd make a massive leap forward because then suddenly everyone would be like, "Well, this just makes no sense at all. We need
right.
to start doing something about it."
Yeah. Wow, that's kind of crazy. Yeah. No, honestly, that is well said. Um, and talking about obesity and quality of our food and stuff like that, that got me thinking about big pharma that you mentioned in your video. And there's this thing you said that they're no longer incentivized to cure people anymore, and because a healthy patient or cured customer is a lost customer. And when I heard that one, I was like, Jesus, that got me rethinking my nursing career. I was like, wow, this is true. That's actually true. Like I feel like I'm not really curing anybody. I'm just helping them stay. I don't know. Like, it's kind of wild to think about, really. Like I know Bitcoiners always talk about ending the Fed, and all that, but like, do you see a world as well where Because of the money printer, we also talking about ending big pharma in a way as well.
These are all a result of the money printer.
Yeah, yeah,
Because when you print more money, the natural outcome is the government gets more and more power, more and more centralization. It also becomes weaker over time because they're achieving it through theft and all of those negative impacts on the population. People in the population begin to wake up. So you have to. There's an increasing level of maintaining a facade, and so you have to co-opt the media. And this is why the media doesn't talk against the government and these sorts of things. But in order for the government to deal more effectively with the downstream issues that come from printing money, so as we just talked, like you print the money incessantly, over time your population becomes more and more unhealthy. As it becomes more and more unhealthy, you have to provision for trying to stop the deterioration in their health. Because if your entire population becomes unhealthy, you lose your productivity and the growth. You have to print more money. You have to issue more debt to make it grow faster, right? So it's never ending cycle. But when your food is fundamentally corrupted, there's no fix. It's just trying. It's just maintenance. You can't fix it, and so you have, uh, unless you opt out completely, which is outside of the government narrative. And so you end up with a set of parasitic industries attached to the government, whether it be defense or big food or big pharma or Wall Street, where they are the beneficiaries, the first receivers and the primary beneficiaries of the new money being printed. Right? And they're so close to the government that they ask to be regulated to protect the public. But it's not to protect the public, it's to stifle competition. And so you end up with two, three, four big providers of these services connected to the government. It means that they make a lot of money because then they're all in on it. They know you don't. If competition is bad, guys, so let's all just not really change very much, and we'll make more money over time. And no one can come in and compete because of all the regulation in place. Oh, and the regulator also used to work at our company, and in 2 years' time, he's going to come back to the company with a big golden parachute. It's so corrupt. It's so corrupt. But the impact is stifle regulation, which makes prices go up and quality go down. And then the businesses realize that actually curing somebody, fully curing them, means you can't monetize them anymore. So why do you want to fully cure somebody? What you really want is a customer for life. What you want is to be able to medicate them for as long as possible. And you want a ring fence around the provision of medication that can't be competed against. So you can charge exorbitant amounts.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this is
Wow.
this is but this is the US health system. I mean, this
Yeah,
is the health system of most countries around the world.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's like
And so
it's mhm.
yeah,
No, it's
yeah.
I was gonna say it's like it's not healthcare system, it's a sick care system at this point. It's just Jesus.
Yeah,
Wow.
it is. It is, and it's the corruption of the free market. So people in the US and around the world would look at the US and say privatized healthcare doesn't work. That's absolutely wrong. It's privatized healthcare when you have a big red button doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah,
It's because you've got rules and regulations in place combined with the downstream effects of the big red button means that the population is getting ever sicker and no one's incentivized to cure them. And no one's allowed to cure them, right? Because the people who do want to cure them can't get a license to cure them,
yeah.
right?
Whew.
So it's not the free market, it's the
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
It's the money.
Jesus. Man, when you say it like that, I'm like, yo, whew. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah, no. Wow. It's something that like it's hard to think about because we're so used to all of like this system, like it's like, oh, you have a problem, here's this pill. Oh, you have a problem, here's this pill. It's like there's a pill or or a needle or syringe for everything. But then we never think about, oh, like, why don't I try to, like, instead of taking a pill to fix my problem, why don't I try to, like, fix my problem from the the root? Like, just don't fix the symptoms, just fix the cause. It's like, it's I don't know, man. It's a lot to think about, really. Wow. Yeah.
But this is why I think within the Bitcoin community, you have a lot of adjacent communities, because once you've woken up to the money is the root of all of these things, the next question becomes like, what else have I what else have I got wrong? What else am I assuming? And this is, you have people taking, much more care of their health through opting out of the pharmaceutical industry effectively, and going back to uh, more logical, you know, human nature based solutions for stuff. And it's like the money. It's like once you explain how a free market's supposed to work, that just follows human action and prices fall and quality goes up, which is just so obviously true. So obviously true. And you can show it in 2 minutes. It's like, well, the world is just totally backwards. And that's just a microcosm example of what you see in all these other bits as well. It's just the way that we experience the world today is polar opposite of the way it should work if you just left people alone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100% agree. 100% agree. And I wanted to ask about, like, a quick little touch on how the money printer affects the education system real quick, because I remember in your video you said that when people some people are better at certain things than others, and then once they realize that, they focus on the things that they're good at and reduce the amount of times on the things that they're poor at to contribute more to society. Was that like a way for you to, like, do a quick little jab at the education system, or am I
No,
just
it
looking into
wasn't
this one too much?
it
Okay.
wasn't meant to that in any way. It was more a comment on what people do when you leave them alone. People want to be productive. And this is obviously generalized, but generally speaking, people want to be productive. People want to get fulfillment. They get more and more fulfillment from the things they're better at, right? And they succeed over time. So naturally, you get attracted to the things you're better at. And if everybody does that, you end up with um, a much more effective economy, just generally. So yeah, you're reading maybe slightly more deeply into what I meant with that comment. However, education's a good question, Ralph, and it's one I didn't have space to put on the slide. It's another one like the banking system that had to make way. But education is similarly just massively skewed now by the big red button. Because if you're a system that requires people to not question the money, then you need to never explain the money to them. You need to instill them with a very structured framework about how they're supposed to pass through life. Right? You go spend 18 years, up to 18 years studying, and these are the things, and then you go to university and you study all these things, and you go and get a job. Oh, by the way, you take out massive loans to go to university, right? And then you've got to get a job to pay off the loans, right? And then you've got to buy the house, so you need more loans, and then you're going to work for 50 years, and then hopefully you've paid off the loans. Hopefully you've paid off the loans. Oh, and the loans, you can't discharge them if in bankruptcy, so you're going to have those around your neck forever. The only way out is death. And then after 50 years, maybe you can retire. As long as you don't get sick along the way and lose the little savings you have because you have to pay exorbitant amount for an ineffective solution that's not going to cure you. And that's life. That is life. And so, but it all starts with the education. All starts with the education system. If it's about following rules, if it's being taught things as truth, whether it be the money, whether it be other aspects of society, they all align with incentivizing people to trust centralized guidance, not to critically think, and get them on a path that they can be manipulated through fear of the unknown or fear of risk generally to comply. And so this is why children are taught in schools about you know climate change and all of these things. You know, uh, you can have different views. Everyone's got different views, but none of these things are certain in all the things that are being taught. But they're taught as truths. There's no ambiguity in any of these things. There's no sense of, well, this is the evidence on one side, this is the evidence on the other side. Let's have an interesting conversation around thinking about the relative merits of both of them. It's this. This is the truth, which is not which is the opposite of education. It's indoctrination, it's not education. And so, I chose climate change there as a topic because it can be quite divisive, right? But there's many divisive topics like this. But you never get taught about money at school.
No, not
No,
at all.
no,
I
because
didn't
if
even
you
know how to
were,
write a check.
no, well, you don't have to do many of those these days, I don't think.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
yeah, it's true. Um, because if you were taught about money, you'd be questioning going to college. It's like,
Yeah,
well, this is really an economic decision.
yeah, yeah,
Does it make sense for me to go?
yeah,
Never in question. There's never that point where they say, just try and think critically about whether this is the right path for you or not.
yeah. Wow, that is deep. Yes. No, yeah, I agree. I agree. Like having little 18-year-olds kids to sign up for like $100,000 death loans is like, I don't know, it's not ethical to me, really. And no, I 100% agree. Yeah, and I know you have to go very soon.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say I seen what you're doing with the channel. I really like it, and I saw that you posting other videos in other languages. So if you guys ever need somebody to do a translation in Creole, man, let me know. I'll do it for free, man. I love what you're doing, man. So yeah,
oh, thank
I
you,
love
Ralph.
it. I love it. And also I have one last question that I always ask all my guests is if you had to go back in time and give yourself advice other than buying more Bitcoin, what would you tell yourself?
Recognize that you might be wrong
Mm,
about
yeah,
anything you believe to be true. Recognize that you might be wrong.
yeah, yeah.
If you
Wow.
do that, you approach everything with, I might be wrong about what I think about this,
Yeah,
then you're going to be just far more receptive to understanding what is actually the correct answer and what is actually true, not what you've been told about anything.
yeah. Damn. That's a good one actually. That's a good one,
Oh,
man.
I'm glad you like it.
Yo, thanks again for your time, man. Where can people find you?
Oh, thanks, Ralph. Well, I've loved chatting with you, so thank you for having me
Oh
on.
yes, same here,
Um,
man. Same here.
you can find me on X at Satmojo, SATMOJOE, Satmojo, and the video lives at satsversusfiat.com. Um, and maybe when you post the video, Ralph, if you wouldn't mind just putting the YouTube link
Oh yeah,
for
100%.
underneath, so people can watch it after. That would be great.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. Thanks again for being here.
Likewise,
Oh yeah.
likewise.